It's 12:17 in the morning and my phone lights up on the nightstand with one line from my friend. I need to move out. Not venting, not the usual complaint. Just tired, flat honesty. Like she'd been carrying it around for weeks and finally set it down in a text. She told me she'd felt this exact same thing last month. Word for word, same 3 a.m. spiral. Then 2 friends messaged her about splitting a place and that changed everything. They signed a lease 6 weeks ago. She said it finally feels like she can breathe. Then another friend chimes in, quieter, almost hesitant. She's not doing roommates. She's not doing family. She's getting her own place, by herself, lease under one name, starting in September. The room goes still for a second, the kind of silence that means everyone's doing math in their head. Someone actually laughs, not mean, just stunned. Wait, you're doing it by yourself? That means you have money, real money, saved up, don't need a cosigner money. And it lends strange, because none of us had said the word money yet, but it was the only thing anyone was actually thinking. My own parents have been dropping the same line for months now. It's about time you moved out, like it's a switch you flip at a certain age. And I get it, I do, but every time I open a rental listing my chest tightens, because the math never once comes out in my favor, not even close. I'm writing this from my parents' guest room, actually, because I'm traveling right now, staying with family for the holidays before everything else starts. I've been filming pieces of a video about this exact conversation, propping my phone against a lamp in a room that isn't mine, which feels a little on the nose considering the subject. After this, I've got a birthday trip planned. My birthday's December 7th, and then a full week in Tokyo right after, something I've been saving up for and looking forward to all year. It's strange to write about not being able to afford an apartment in the same week I'm planning international flights, but that's sort of the contradiction I live in now. I keep telling myself I'll post more of the actual travel stuff on my other pages, the vlogging, the day-to-day, since I won't be uploading here as consistently these next couple weeks. It's a small promise to myself, the kind I make constantly, and I don't always know if I'll keep it, but I wanted to write it down anyway. But here's the actual thing I sat down to write about. Everything costs more now. Not a little more. Not inflation normal more. Groceries, gas, the coffee I used to grab without thinking twice. All of it costs noticeably more than it did even 3 years ago. And my income has not caught up with any of it. Not remotely. So I want to narrow in on one piece of that. The one that keeps coming up every time my friends and I talk. And that's housing. Specifically what it actually costs for someone my age to live anywhere decent right now and how differently that's playing out compared to even our older siblings' generation. A washer and dryer inside the unit, a dishwasher, a thermostat that actually works, a parking spot if you drive. These used to just be things an apartment had, baseline stuff, nothing special. Now every one of them shows up as a line item that raises the rent by hundreds, like they're luxury upgrades instead of basic function. Every single year I've been renting, it's gotten a little worse. Not dramatically, not all at once, just enough that I notice it every time a lease renews. A place that felt reasonable at 22 feels like a stretch at 24, and I haven't changed much about how I live. The numbers around me just keep climbing. Out of that pressure, I've watched 2 patterns take over completely. People staying home with their parents way longer than they used to, no shame attached to it anymore, and people doubling, tripling up with roommates just to make the number work. Almost nobody I know is renting a place solo without help. So that's what I actually want to dig into here. The why behind all of it. Why things got this expensive. Why owning anything feels so far out of reach for people my age compared to the generations before us. And why staying with family stopped being embarrassing and started being the smart move for so many of us. Quick aside, because I'd feel dishonest leaving it out of the actual entry. The video version of this has a sponsor read for a company called Built, a program that lets renters earn points on the rent they're already paying, since rent is usually the biggest expense most of us have every single month and normally earns nothing back. Those points can go toward flights, hotel stays, fitness classes, or even get put straight back toward next month's rent, which is the part that actually got my attention. There's no cost to join, which matters to me because I've learned to be suspicious of anything that asks broke 20-somethings to pay up front for a program that's supposedly saving them money. It works with over 500 airlines and something like 700,000 hotels and properties worldwide, which sounded made up to me until I actually looked into it myself. If you're curious, there's a link and a code in the description of the video version, and okay, that's the last I'll say about it here. Okay, back to the actual entry, because underneath all of this is one blunt fact I keep circling back to. The economy feels bad right now. I checked my bank balance 4 times last night. 4. Not because anything changed, just because checking felt like doing something. Genuinely bad, in a way that's been sitting on my chest since I became an adult who has to pay for things. The strange part is I can actually point to when it stopped feeling bad, briefly. Early in the pandemic, when everything had shut down but employers suddenly needed people so badly that workers had real leverage for maybe the first time in my adult life. Jobs felt plentiful. Quitting one felt low stakes. That window closed fast, but I remember it. People started calling it the Great Resignation, and quiet quitting became this whole cultural moment because for once employees weren't desperate to keep whatever job they had. Companies had to actually work to keep people around, offering more, accommodating more, because losing an employee suddenly cost them more than it had in years. It felt, briefly, like leverage had shifted. If I'm honest about the timeline, that window ran from about 2021 to the tail end of 2022, a little over a year. That's it. That's the entire stretch where being young and working didn't feel like constantly bracing for impact, and I didn't even fully appreciate it while it was happening, which feels like its own kind of loss now. Here's the layer under that though, the one that's harder to sit with. While regular people were struggling through lockdown, the biggest companies and their shareholders were posting record profits. Not surviving, thriving. There are entire articles breaking down how much money moved upward during exactly the years the rest of us were falling apart quietly at home. All that money had to go somewhere, so for a while it looked like a boom. Projects funded left and right, spending everywhere you looked. But that kind of spending never lasts forever, and eventually it pulled back, hard and fast, and everyone who'd gotten used to that temporary abundance got hit by the correction all at once. Which brings us to right now, where the hiring market genuinely sucks. It takes so much more effort just to land a job, let alone keep one, and the sense of security that used to come with having steady work has basically evaporated. I know people with strong resumes who've been applying for 8-9 months straight, with almost nothing to show for it. And it's not just hard to get hired, it's just as hard to stay employed. Mass layoffs have become something that happens almost every quarter now, across industries that used to feel untouchable. It stopped being shocking news and started being background noise, which honestly might be the more unsettling part, that we've adjusted to expecting it. And when those cuts happen, people my age tend to go first. We're usually the least experienced, the newest hires, the lowest on the seniority list. My roommate's company cut 30% of its staff in one afternoon. No warning email, nothing. Just badges that stopped working by 5. It's a strange thing to know statistically about your own generation, that you're structurally first in line to lose your income. So even for people who do have a job right now, there's this underlying hum of instability that never fully goes away. Finances stop feeling like something solid to build on and start feeling more like a variable, something that could shift under you with almost no warning, which changes how you plan literally everything else in your life. And rent does not care about any of that. It doesn't pause because your job situation is unstable. It doesn't wait for your paycheck to catch up. It just keeps climbing every single year on its own schedule. If you're the kind of person who reads other people's notes apps too, stick around. I write this stuff down regularly. Fortune actually published something on this that stuck with me. They found the cost of living has been climbing faster than entry-level salaries for people my age, and spending 30% of your income on rent alone has basically become the new normal in most big cities now, not the warning sign it used to be considered. That same reporting mentioned people living paycheck to paycheck, ending up with second jobs just to make things balance, not to save, not to get ahead, purely to make rent and groceries land in the same month without going negative. That's not a hustle story, that's survival math. And there's a difference between the two that I think gets blurred a lot. I grew up hearing this rule from every finance influencer online, that you should never spend more than a third of your paycheck on rent. It sounded reasonable, even conservative. But I genuinely don't know a single person my age for whom that math actually works anymore, not in any city where the jobs and the opportunities actually are. And still, even knowing all of that, there's this pressure sitting on my shoulders to move out anyway, to have my own place, to prove I've made it to some invisible next stage. Nobody says it outright anymore, but it's there in the way people ask where you're living, in the pause before they respond. I think this is a specifically American thing too, this idea that you leave your parents' house right around 18 or right after college, and that's when you officially become an adult. Other places don't treat it that way at all, but growing up here, that timeline gets hammered into you early, like a deadline you're quietly failing. It wasn't even us who first ran into this wall. Millennials hit it before we did, graduating into a brutal job market and facing their own wave of housing costs nobody had prepared them for. A lot of them ended up back home too. We just inherited a worse version of the same problem, with less shock value attached to it. Okay, that's the surface version of it. Here's the part I don't say out loud very often. I still believed, on some level, in the version where you get the degree, you get the job, you find someone, you buy the house, happily ever after. I don't think I ever fully let go of wanting that, even after watching it fail for everyone around me. Because what actually happens is you get the degree and then you send out 60 applications and hear back from 4. You get a job eventually, if you're lucky, but it's nothing close to guaranteed, and property stays completely out of reach regardless, sitting somewhere in the distance like a finish line that keeps quietly moving back every year you check on it. There's a number that stopped me when I first read it. A 2023 study from Harris Poll, done for Bloomberg, found that about 45% of people between 18 and 29 are living at home with their families. Almost half of us. I read that twice just to make sure I wasn't misreading it. That's the highest that number has ever been recorded. And people aren't just moving home briefly anymore either. They're staying longer, well into their late 20s in a lot of cases. Whatever used to be the average timeline for moving out and staying out on your own has quietly stretched by years, and almost nobody officially announced that shift, it just happened. I almost didn't want to write the next part down. The stigma around living at home has softened, genuinely. Most people my age don't judge you for it anymore. But nobody talks enough about what it actually costs you mentally. You save money living at home. What you spend instead is something much harder to put a number on. Even in a genuinely good family, one where nobody's cruel, nobody's difficult, there's still this creeping feeling of regression, like you're folding back into old versions of yourself you thought you'd outgrown. I felt it hard during lockdown, that sense of losing ground I'd already covered, slipping back into patterns from being 16 instead of the adult I actually was by then. So here's where I actually land on it. I know the old dream is dead. Degree, job, house, done. I know that. I've searched average rent, 1 bedroom 9 times this week alone, and I still want the self-sufficiency anyway, the version of grown-up my parents had that people online keep performing. Wanting it doesn't make me naive, it just makes me still human about it. Okay, I've written a lot about staying with family, so let me shift to the other side of this, the roommate piece, because I think it's actually the more interesting conversation, and honestly, the one I have more complicated feelings about myself, since it's the version of not alone that I'm currently living. I looked up when this actually started, this whole roommate thing, because I needed to know it wasn't always this normal. Back in the 1960s, only 6% of young adults lived with someone who wasn't a partner. 6%. That means nearly everyone either lived alone or lived with someone they actually loved. We didn't invent this arrangement. We got pushed into it. By 2018, that 6% had turned into 1 in 3. 1 in 3 young adults living with someone who isn't their partner, isn't family, is basically a stranger they found through a group chat or a listing online. That jump happened in under 60 years. I keep thinking about how fast that shifted and how quietly, like nobody ever actually announced it out loud. Okay, that's the easy version of the history. Here's the actual version I tell myself at midnight doing the math again. Splitting rent with someone makes more financial sense than carrying it all alone right now. It isn't about wanting company, it's survival arithmetic. Half of anything is smaller than the whole of it, and I need smaller right now, whatever that costs me quietly. And roommates aren't some strange new arrangement either. Television normalized this decades ago, quietly training all of us. Sitcoms full of 2 or 3 people crammed into apartments that would cost triple what those characters could ever actually afford on paper. I grew up watching those shows thinking that was what your 20s were supposed to look like. Nobody warned me the real rent wouldn't match the script. Here's a number that actually stopped me mid-scroll. The typical person living alone in an apartment in this country right now averages 50 years old. 50, not 25, not 30, 50. Living alone isn't the starter move anymore. It's the thing you eventually earn after decades of paychecks, if you earn it at all. I read that number twice to be sure I wasn't misreading it. Meanwhile, people my age keep roommates well into their late 20s, sometimes further, not because we love the noise or the shared bathroom schedule, but because the savings are the only thing keeping the math from breaking entirely. I used to think roommates were a phase you outgrew by 30. Now I think they're where a lot of us actually live, quietly, for years longer than planned. Here's the number that actually made my stomach drop, the one I wrote down twice to check it. The average home price in this country sat around $334,000 at the end of 2013. Now it's over $513,000. That isn't inflation quietly catching up. That's the ground moving while I was still trying to save a deposit that gets further away every month I check. So owning anything, a house, a condo, even a small one, feels less like a goal now and more like a fantasy that requires someone else's money standing behind it. Parental help isn't a bonus anymore, it's basically the entry fee. And I sit with that fact that the people who make it work quietly had a safety net under them the whole time, one I never asked for and cannot manufacture. I still think about living alone sometimes, late, phone in hand, scrolling listings I cannot afford, only to feel something different for a minute. And I won't pretend it wouldn't be good. Privacy that's actually mine. A door I close and nobody questions it. Mental clarity that comes from not performing for anyone in my own kitchen. I want that. I'm not going to pretend I don't still want that. But here's the part I keep avoiding writing down. Alone doesn't always mean peaceful. Sometimes it means quiet in a way that turns heavy, especially once the days get shorter and it's dark by 5 and there's nobody around to notice you haven't really talked out loud since Tuesday. Winter alone hits different than summer alone. I learned that the hard way, sitting in it, running the math again, which might be the one thing roommates actually give you that I don't say out loud enough. Not friendship, not even closeness necessarily. Contact, someone's keys in the door, someone's dishes in the sink that annoy you but also remind you a person exists nearby. I didn't love my old roommate. I loved that I wasn't the only heartbeat in the apartment some nights, and I didn't notice that mattered until it was gone. Living alone means every single dollar of that rent has your name on it and nobody else's. No splitting it 3 ways when the paycheck lands and it's already smaller than it was back in September. No second income to absorb one bad month. It's you, the pool number, due on the first, every time, whether or not the job held up that particular week. It's still 11:40. Same phone, same math, a different night this time. I don't have a clean answer for any of this, whether alone is worth it or roommates are the quiet compromise we all agree to without ever saying so out loud. If you're living through some version of this too, tell me in the comments what your place actually looks like right now. I'd actually like to know